Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and welcome back to Black American Lineage. Thank you for your support. Thank you for going on this journey through our past and present. And today we're talking about the master teacher, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, who was born in my home state of Alabama. John Henrik Clarke was a pioneering African American historian and Pan-Africanist who reshaped the study of African history and culture. Born John Henrik Clarke on January 1st, 1915, in Union Springs, Alabama, Clarke later changed the spelling of his name to Henrik to honor the Danish author Henrik Ibsen. He emerged as a leading intellectual force in the 20th century, especially in the development of Africana studies and the promotion of Afrocentric scholarship. Now we remember that Dr. Carter G. Woodson was the founder of Black History Month, which began in about 1921 or 1926, sometime in the 1920s. Carter G. Woodson focused just on Black American accomplishments in the United States, documenting and archiving our history here in the United States. Dr. John Henrik Clarke's reach was much farther. He included the entirety of African people, beginning with the continent and establishing that civilization and history really began in Africa. Before historians and anthropologists like Dr. John Henrik Clarke came on the scene and forced these so-called scholars to look at historical records, the narrative about African people and Black people was that Black people had made no contribution to world civilization. They had taken the accomplishments of African people and placed them in the category of Europeans, beginning with Egypt. And that's still controversial, even as they dig those mummies up and those mummies tell them through DNA that they were Black. They are still trying to argue that the ancient Egyptians were white. But thanks to historians like Dr. John Henrik Clarke, the discussion has begun, and they are making a very strong case of Africa, and especially East Africa is what they mostly study, is the beginning of civilization. The Greeks and the Romans and the ones that they try to credit with all of this information went to Egypt to study. And that is what these Black historians have had to force the so-called Egyptologists and white scholars to understand. Because of his conviction that civilization did begin in Africa, John Henrik Clarke was instrumental in establishing Africana studies as a legitimate academic discipline. Before he came along, it was not considered legitimate. It was just Black people running around being emotional. But he established it as an academic discipline. He helped create the African Heritage Studies Association and the Black Caucus of the African Studies Association in the 1960s. He taught at institutions like Cornell University, an Ivy League school, where he was a distinguished visiting professor of African history. His work influenced curricula and inspired generations of scholars. His writings focused on reclaiming African history from Eurocentric narratives. And this is really important because now every college, small and large, has an African American history department. And it is because of the advocacy and the scholarship of people like John Henrik Clarke. Before John Henrik Clarke and others like him came along, we didn't have any Black American or African American studies in these schools. So this was a very important accomplishment on his part, because before then, Black history was not considered a part of any college's curriculum. John Henrik Clarke was a staunch Pan-Africanist, advocating for unity among people of African descent worldwide. His scholarship emphasized the global contributions of African civilizations and challenged historical distortions that minimized African agency. And so that was his big thing. He included all of Africa and all of African descended people because we are connected. We are a part of the same system of exploiting and taking advantage of Africa and African descended people. But John Henry Clarke, being a Pan Africanist, puts the youth of Black America at odds with him because they don't believe in Pan Africanism, because their feeling is that Black Americans were the only ones advocating for Pan Africanism, and it hasn't benefited us. Because even though we are a part of the same system globally, when it comes to racism, when it comes to discrimination, when it comes to oppression, but our problems are not the same. And I think the African diaspora, as they are called, see Black Americans as trying to impose our problems on them. So this generation of Black Americans are saying, you know what? We are not the same. We don't have the same objectives, and we don't need to be advocating for Pan-Africanism in America. As a matter of fact, Black Americans are now saying we need to delineate. Now, that has caused a lot of problems in the so-called diaspora. They're very upset about that because people of the African diaspora from Africa, from the Caribbean, or wherever they come from, have been able to come to the United States and benefit from our struggle without having to struggle themselves. And they have the luxury of just saying, well, I'm not like you. We're not like you. So this generation of Black Americans are saying, okay, we're no longer Pan-Africanists. We're done with that. So we are back to just focusing on Black America and Black American issues. But John Henry Clarke saw the big picture, and the big picture is real. It is very real. It's significant, but everybody has to see the big picture in order for Pan-Africanism to work. So I think that each generation, and I'm talking about Black Americans, has to assess the work that was done the generations before, and they have to decide what the pros were and what the cons were and how to move accordingly. And I think that's what this generation is doing. John Henry Clarke's writings span from 1937 to 1996, and they are preserved at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in New York. And this collection includes his correspondence, lecture notes, and organizational records. The Africana Library at Cornell University was named in his honor in 1986, recognizing his foundational role in the field of Africana studies. John Henry Clarke passed away on July 16, 1998, in Manhattan, New York, at the age of 83. His legacy continues to shape the study of African and African American history, and his work remains a cornerstone for scholars and activists committed to historical justice and cultural empowerment. The work that he did is very important to us in modern times because it sets the foundation for the history of African people. But that history branches off from time to time. But hopefully, we will come together and everybody will realize that we really are in the same matrix and we really do need to be working together. But everybody has to see that, not just one group. John Henry Clarke has some very interesting quotes that I will share with you now. Probably his most popular quote is, "I only debate with my equals, all others I teach." He also said, "To control a people, you must first control what they think about themselves and how they regard their history and culture. And when your conqueror makes you ashamed of your culture and your history, he needs no prison walls and no chains to hold you." And we see this quote personified in people that we call sellouts and sambos and coons. They have no respect for their culture or their history, and many times we say they are filled with self-hatred. According to John Henry Clarke, history is not everything, but it is a starting point. History is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is a compass they use to find themselves on the map of human geography. It tells them where they are, but more importantly, what they must be. I think I agree with that. John Henry Clarke states, I am a nationalist and a Pan-Africanist first and foremost. I was well grounded in history before ever taking a history course. I did not spend much formal time in school. I had to work. And really, he did a lot of the work that he did without any formal education. He became formally educated much later in life. So what he had to share was his natural genius. Finally, he said, and I think we can all agree, I want to make it clear that the Black race did not come to the United States culturally empty handed. The role and importance of ethnic history is in how well it teaches a people to use their own talents, take pride in their own history, and love their own memories. So we did not come here culturally empty handed. They brought their culture with them. And from that, they have been able to expand and build a culture that's imitated and appreciated throughout the world. Okay, y'all, this is Dr. John Henry Clarke. This is just a biographical sketch and a little bit about his life and his contributions. Let me know what you think about the video and have a good evening.